The Anunnaki are found in the mythological traditions of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Basically, all the super old human civilizations of the Near East believed in a form of these beings. And in UFO phenomenon lore, they come from the planet Nibiru, also called Planet X, which has some interstellar connection to our solar system. In 1849, ancient tablets of Babylon were discovered in the Near East that dates back to the 7th century BCE. The tablets describe the Anunnaki, who are depicted as descending from heaven in flying vehicles of some sort. Many of these depictions of the Anunnaki can be translated as sci-fi in nature with a little imagination. The Anunnaki's style of dress was similar to the ancient Persian, though the style was found in many cultures of the surrounding area. These aliens are taller and larger than humans, but otherwise are pretty much indistinguishable from us, at least to most sources. The Anunnaki are immune to disease and don't physically age past a certain point, making their lifespans eternal, I guess, unless they're killed somehow, any other means than old age. So they can hypothetically live forever but are still mortal. After arriving on Earth, and after some internal conflict, it was agreed upon within the ranks of the Anunnaki to create a slave species as a source of manual labor. Primitive bipeds on the planet were an ideal choice for this servant race, so the Anunnaki mixed their genes with them to create humankind. There were many experiments, versions, and mistakes, but eventually, they had their slave race to mine their precious metals for them. However, they purposely made humans weaker than themselves, with short lifespans, among many more biological vulnerabilities. So according to many ET versions of the Anunnaki, humans were created with no sense of morality, purpose, or philosophical meaning. Primitive man was a resource to be exploited, and nothing more. The Anunnaki are a religious civilization with their own code of ethics, but they are not benevolent, and these codes of ethics do not apply to people who are not Anunnaki. Despite this, though, there were Anunnaki who were agreeable to humans, who were fond of humans, who thought of humans as their children. However, these Anunnaki were in the minority. Violence is a common tool to be used in their culture, and their culture kind of revolved around violence to a large degree. The reason that they had to come to Earth to gather resources in the first place was because they basically destroyed their own planet through violence. And many disagreements were settled through ritualistic confrontations. In fact, the latest king of Nibiru had a ritualistic duel with his predecessor that was dethroned, in which they had all their clothes taken off, fighting naked, and ended with his wiener being bitten off, which is never good. But he won the fight nonetheless. Their character is individualistic too at the same time, so their morality is pretty gray, just like humans. And they could have a variety of different perspectives on violence depending on who it is. The ranks of the Anunnaki also have the incredibly wise, spiritual gurus, scientific geniuses, and the most enlightened of the enlightened. So they are a dynamic ET race, to say the least. Then there's the whole Nephilim side of things. These beings could be the giants mentioned in ancient accounts, or at least linked to them. The Anunnaki being the primogenitors of that notorious race. The size and strength of the Anunnaki is drastically superior to humanity. In any case, though, the slave race that they created looked up to them like they were gods, with some of these so-called gods even having hybrid children with humans that some consider could be the great heroes of myth and legend, and whose descendants are the elite puppet masters who rule us from behind the scenes till this day. Because according to this narrative, the gods had to eventually leave Earth. Accounts vary on why, but a common take is that the Anunnaki were back at war, back in their own territory of space, either against some unknown enemy or civil war amongst themselves. But it was also said that they would one day return. However, humanity's reception with their creators is unlikely to be beneficial to our own civilization. So obviously this version of the Anunnaki is kind of a bummer, and originates from a man named Zecharia Sitchin. Though it's not all doom and gloom. Sitchin wrote many popular books on the subject after allegedly deciphering these ancient Sumerian tablets. I got super into these books for a bit about 10 years ago, and while thinking them fascinating, never really took them too seriously. Later, upon researching more, there turned out to be a lot of holes in Sitchin's theories. See, back in the day when he wrote the books, the Sumerian language was only known to a select few experts. In recent times, not so much. Tons of inaccuracies were found in Sitchin's translations. He was very frivolous and strained in assigning meanings to ancient words. The man constantly quotes out of context connections that distort evidence, and he used inaccurate references many times throughout his research, and many words he presented as facts were straight up translated wrong. Now, to be fair, a lot of Sitchin's mistakes could be from the technological limitations of the time, so it's not all his fault, but it's blatantly obvious he was biased and released information as fact when he wasn't sure. He also avoided presenting evidence that contradicted his own theories and translations. His astrological findings were wrong too, with hundreds of Sumerian calendars recently decoded and translated as only having 5 planets, and not the 12 that Sitchin claims. It turned out he translated stars as planets on many occasions, and in truth, Sitchin's linguistics, anthropology, biology, and astronomy were far from professional. He even completely ignores the world outside of Mesopotamia for the most part, and it is proven he really didn't understand the Babylonian language that he often uses as references. Also, he really seemed to bend backwards with his confirmation bias in trying to portray a connection of his religious views into the Sumerian tablets. So nobody's perfect. Doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. It's just, it shouldn't be taken at face value. And with all the ruins still buried in the sands of the Near East, we have a lot more to discover concerning the world's first civilization, or accepted civilization. Though Sitchin's work has spawned many versions of the Anunnaki and contradicting theories in the New Age ET community as well, such as the Anunnaki didn't create humans with their own genes, we were already here. They just altered a small group of humanity, who eventually later would become Atlanteans. And there was already like a whole bunch of humans running around doing their own thing who would develop naturally. Or that the Anunnaki were a product of the reptilians' hybrid experiments with Sumerian aliens, making the Anunnaki an alleged member of the ET reptilian Draconic Empire. Yeah, this stuff gets really weird. Or there's also that the Nephilim, fallen angels from the Bible, were a hybrid of Anunnaki and humans. Others even say that they have changed their ways to become, quote-unquote, the good guys, wanting humanity to ascend to a higher state of consciousness. The information regarding this ET race is as contradictory as it gets. Even the Sumerians were unable to keep their story straight in their own ancient tablets. And much of the pseudoscience claiming to know the Anunnaki to be real history get basic facts in many categories constantly wrong. So, take any information you find on this alien race with a grain of salt. Who knows? Maybe we are just a hybrid alien slave race, floating on a ball of resources for the gathering in space, and the Anunnaki's home planet of Nibiru is en route back to Earth. Anything is possible, and Sitchin could totally be right. In my personal opinion, though, I feel like the Anunnaki are more esoteric than extraterrestrial. But then again, there's just so much ET lore surrounding them, it's hard to just disregard it.